They say you always remember the last normal morning, not because it was remarkable, but because it became a line you'd never cross again. Mine started with lukewarm coffee in the hum of fluorescent lights in the elevator. My heels clicked. Down the corridor, like always, echoing off the glass walls of our floor. I remember thinking I should have worn the navy blouse, the one she once said brought out the gold in my skin. Stupid, sentimental thought, but I was still trying to impress her. Even after everything we'd shared, Daniel's door was always left slightly open, just for me, a silent invitation, a signal that I belonged in that space where no one else dared enter unannounced. But not. That day, it was closed. Worse, it was locked. I stopped, confused, then knocked lightly. No answer, and then, through the fogged glass panel beside the frame, I heard laughter, hers, and another voice, lighter, younger. Then a low hum of a flirtatious whisper followed by a giggle. It didn't sound like work. The handle stayed cold. Under my fingers, I turned, pretending to check my phone, heart pounding like I'd run a marathon through shame. When the door finally opened, Daniel stepped out, tucking a strand of her jet black hair behind her ear like she was still collecting herself. She looked flushed. Her crisp white shirt was unbuttoned, just enough to expose a smear of red lipstick along her collarbone. Not mine, not mine. Her eyes caught mine, and something inside me broke quietly. The familiar warmth in her gaze, the soft curve of her smile, the silent acknowledgement of all our secrets, all of it was gone, replaced by something sharp and distant. Like I was a colleague she didn't quite remember. "You're in early?" she said, cool and clipped. "Yeah," I croaked. "Wanted to finalize the Singapore budget numbers?" She nodded once. "That won't be necessary." Then she walked past me, not a touch, not a glance back. By noon, I was summoned by HR. A white woman in a pink cardigan and brittle smile handed me a paper. I couldn't quite read through the buzzing in my ears. Something about restructuring, budget cuts. Apologies for the inconvenience. My badge was deactivated before I left the office. No chance to say goodbye. No explanation. No chance to look her in the eye. They didn't even let me clean my desk. I stood outside the building with a cardboard box and no job, while the sky broke into a weeping drizzle. The soft drizzle turned my silk blouse translucent, clinging to my back like second skin. I remember staring at the entrance, watching others walk in and out like the world hadn't just shattered. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to ask her white out why kiss me like a promise and drop me like an inconvenience. Why? Whisper that she couldn't sleep without hearing my voice, and then erase me with a signature. But I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I walked to the coffee shop across the street, sat in the corner booth we used to share, ordered her usual drink out of habit, flat white, 1 sugar, oat milk. I stared at it until it went cold. Untouched, my phone buzzed. Once. "Sorry things happen this way. You're strong. You'll be fine." That was it. No name, no apology, no humanity. I deleted it. My hands were shaking. I thought about the way she used to trace my fingers under the conference table. How we laughed during midnight calls about the future. The weekend in Montreal where she whispered, "You're the only real thing in my life." Maybe I was real, but not enough. Not enough to protect. Not enough to keep. I watched the steam fade from the cup and thought about the lipstick on her collar. Fire truck red, The kind I never wore because she said I looked softer in neutrals. Maybe that was the problem. I'd been soft. Predictable. Easy to mold. Disposable. The days blurred after that. I applied for jobs, ate crackers for dinner, watched the sun crawl through blinds and thought about her hands, her eyes. The weight of her absence. What hurt most wasn't losing the job. It was the theft of meaning. The realization that I was a shadow to someone I saw as light. I became obsessed with questions. Did she ever love me? Was I just a distraction? Was there ever a version of her that was real? Grief is strange when it's invisible. No funeral, no closure. Just absence and noise and that red, mocking stain on her collar that told me everything and nothing at once. People at the company never reached out. Fear does that. They all knew she was protected, powerful, untouchable. I was just a footnote now, an erased file in a closed HR case, but part of me didn't want to be remembered. Part of me wanted to disappear, just long enough to understand how someone becomes a ghost without dying. I took off my watch the night I left the apartment, the one she bought me, silver, clean, professional. I placed it gently in a drawer beside the keycard they never took back. I didn't know it then, but that night, the night I let everything go, was also the night I quietly began to plan revenge. Wasn't a word I said aloud. Not yet, but it shimmered beneath the surface, cool and patient, waiting for the moment I'd remember who I was before she rewrote me. She saw me before I knew how to be seen. Back then, I was just another assistant analyst, neat, reliable, good with numbers, and invisible in meetings. I took pride in being unnoticed and staying out of the politics that clouded our polished corner of the corporate skyline. But Danielle saw me. It started on a Tuesday. A budget slide I'd built caught her attention in a meeting. Afterward, she asked me to stay behind. You build better models than half my management team, she said, leaning one hand against the table, her gold bracelet catching the light like it had something to say. I laughed nervously. I just like clean numbers. She didn't smile. She studied me. I like clean minds. That was the first time I felt it, the pull. The way her words felt like invitations with strings tied to something deeper, something forbidden, over. The next few weeks, she kept pulling me in. Stay after the meeting. Help me prepare this presentation. Come with me to the conference dinner. I told myself it was professional. A mentorship, that's what she called it. But it was more than that. Her eyes lingered a fraction too long. Her text bled past midnight. One time she brushed a strand of hair from my cheek in the elevator. She said, "You have the kind of face people don't forget." And I didn't sleep for 2 nights. When she finally kissed me, it was in a car outside the Marlowe Hotel. Rain slid down the windshield like film credits. She kissed me without hesitation, her hand on my jaw, steady. Unsure, when she pulled back, she said, "This can't exist in the office. You know that, right?" I nodded, breathless. "But it's real," she whispered. I nodded again. Because I needed it to be. We became shadows moving through the same halls by day and secret lovers by night. She'd book rooms under fake names. We'd meet in elevators, pretending we didn't know each other, only to end up tangled together in hotels with blackout curtains and champagne on the side table. At first, it felt like a movie. She was magnetic. She made me feel chosen, exceptional. like I'd been plucked from the ordinary because she saw something the rest of the world missed. She told me I grounded her, that I made her feel human, that she couldn't talk to anyone else the way she talked to me, and I told myself it was love. I stopped answering friends' calls. My sister noticed I missed her engagement dinner and left a long, worried voicemail I never returned. I skipped interviews for roles I once dreamed about. Daniel told me they wouldn't challenge me, that we were building something bigger. Together, you're not just some junior analyst, she'd say, lying next to me in a room that didn't belong to either of us. You're mine. I mistook that for protection, for devotion. But really, it was possession. Looking back now, I realize she never asked about my life, my family, my dreams. Everything centered around her orbit, her stress, her success, her loneliness. I became her confidant, her emotional dumping ground, her personal cheerleader. And when I needed something in return, even something as simple as reassurance, she'd offer silence or sex or a cryptic smile. The few times I pressed her, "What are we? Where is this going?" she'd change the subject, kiss me, whisper something intoxicating like, "Don't ruin this with questions." And I never dared push harder, because every time I did, something in her eyes went cold. Coworkers started to talk dot at first. It was subtle. Looks exchanged in meetings. Conversations that stopped when I entered the room. Then came the warnings. "You're smart. Don't get too close to her. She burned through people. She only keeps you around until she's done with you." I laughed it off, defended her, said people were jealous, that they didn't understand her brilliance, her complexity, that what we had was different. But late at night, when I lay alone waiting for her call, the doubts would flicker like faulty light bulbs. Little things began to sting. The way she kept her phone face down when we were together, the time she canceled a weekend trip without explanation, or how she introduced me to others with a forced neutrality, never acknowledging the intimacy we shared. Still, I stayed, because I believed in the version of her that existed only in the quiet, when she looked at me like I was a shelter from her storm. Because I thought if I loved her hard enough, she'd make space for me in her real life. Because I confused being needed with being valued. One night in Paris, I remember lying beside her while she fell asleep mid-sentence. Her breathing deepened, her hand slack against my hip. I looked at her then, the face, the perfect skin, the mouth that held both cruelty and kindness, and I thought I could be happy here. Even if this is all it ever is, that was the lie I built my world on. The next morning, she made a call I wasn't meant to overhear. Her voice was soft, almost sweet. "She's useful, that's all. I'm not committing to anything." I sat in the bathroom, staring at the fogged-up mirror, trying not to let the words stitch themselves into my ribs. I didn't confront her. I told myself I misheard, that she was talking about someone else. Anything to keep the dream alive, because love, when it's built on denial, turns into a kind of religion, and I was faithful. When we got back from Paris, I started noticing her absence more. The late replies, the clipped tone in texts, the growing distance. It felt like trying to hold water in my hands, no matter how tightly I cupped my fingers. It kept slipping through, but I didn't want to believe it until the morning I stood outside her locked office door. Until I saw that red lipstick, brazen and cruel, against the collar she once let me press my lips to. It wasn't the kiss that ended us, or the lie, or the job. It was the moment I realized I had let her choose me and never once stopped to ask if I had chosen her back. I told myself it was closure. Just one message, not desperate, just necessary. Can we talk? She left it on read. No typing bubbles, no response, not even a lie. That silence did more damage than any answer could have. I sat on my bed, phone in my palm, staring at the screen as if sheer willpower could summon a flicker of humanity from her. But the screen stayed cold, dark, and final. Like her, that night, I learned her new product launch was being held at the same downtown gallery we used to pass on late-night walks. I wasn't on the guest list, of course, but I still had the black dress she once said made me look uncheckable. I wore it like armor. I didn't go to be seen. I went to see her. To know with finality what we were. Or weren't. The event was already buzzing when I walked in. Spotlights sliced through the room. Industry giants and influencers sipped champagne, their laughter echoing off whitewashed walls and digital displays. Her product launch was everywhere, splashed across screens, scrolled on tablets, hanging from banners with her name in bold silver font. Daniel Ashcroft, Executive Vice President of Innovation. She was the star, and I was the ghost. Then I saw her up on the stage, mid-speech, confident, electric, dressed in tailored navy, her favorite color when she needed to impress. Her smile was wide, practiced, effortless. Beside her stood the new girl, younger, blonder, wearing red lipstick, that same fire truck red that had burned into my memory. They stood close, too close. The girl's hand brushed Daniel's back just for a second, but it was enough. It was a language I'd once known. Daniel looked out at the crowd, beaming. And now, please welcome our new Vice President of Strategy, someone with fresh vision, brilliance, and fierce dedication. She paused, looked toward her. Carolyn Bennett. The room applauded. I didn't move. That title, Vice President of Strategy, was the one she once whispered into my hair after sex. It'll be yours one day. She made me believe it. The years I stayed late, worked weekends, canceled holidays, all for a future that now wore someone else's lipstick. The betrayal wasn't whispered anymore. It was televised, projected, lit up in neon after the speeches. The room scattered into curated networking zones and catered champagne flutes. I moved like someone half awake, weaving through people in slow motion until I reached the back hallway near the service exit. I knew the building, I knew the flow, I knew her habits, and sure enough, 10 minutes later, she came down the hall, alone, phone in hand, typing. I stepped out from the shadows. Her body stiffened. You shouldn't be here, she said, like a line from a bad play. I needed to see you. For what? I searched her face for softness, for guilt, for anything that resembled the woman I once laid beside. But all I found was indifference, like she was speaking to a mistake on a spreadsheet. Just tell me, I said. Tell me I meant nothing. But it was all in my head. Just say it. She didn't blink. You meant something. For a time, I flinched. You said you loved me. I say a lot of things, she replied, her tone flat. I gave you everything. She tilted her head. And now you want to thank you. Card? No. I want the truth. She sighed, long, impatient, as if my pain was a meeting running over time. Fine. You want it? You were a mistake. An emotional indulgence. then I thought you were smart enough to understand boundaries. My breath caught in my throat. She kept going. You were lonely. I was tired. We crossed lines. That doesn't. We may owe you a career or a future. You misunderstood everything. I felt like the hallway tilted. My vision swam, but you promise, God, you're still clinging to pillow talk? She laughed, cruel and low. Let it go. Or I'll make you regret not walking away quietly. My blood went cold. Dot. It wasn't just dismissal. It was a threat. I stared at her, at the woman I once thought was extraordinary, who now looked smaller than ever. You don't get to erase me, I whispered. She stepped closer. I already have. And then she walked past me, heels clicking, like a metronome of finality. I stood there, alone in the silence she left behind, trembling. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood still, hollowed out. Her words rattled through my skull. A mistake. You misunderstood everything. I already have. I wanted to collapse, but something held me up. Not pride, not anger. Something colder, sharper. Clarity. This wasn't just heartbreak. This was erasure, professional, personal, intentional. She had rewritten the narrative to make me the fool and herself the hero. And the worst part, she almost got away with it. When I stepped outside, the night air hit my face like a slap. My phone buzzed in my clutch. Messages from former coworkers, all some variation of, did you see the news? She promoted Caroline. Are you okay? I turned the phone off. I didn't want their pity. I didn't want to be anyone's tragedy. I took the train home. My reflection stared back at me in the window, smeared mascara, cracked lipstick, eyes that looked unfamiliar. I had shaped my life around her, around what she saw in me, around what I thought we could be, but there was no we. There never was. Just a woman who collected admiration and discarded it when it became inconvenient. The next morning, I didn't get out of bed, not because I was broken, but because I needed silence. A void. I lay there staring at the ceiling, remembering the years I built her reports, cleaned up her PR messes, made her shine. I thought of every private joke, every email I covered for, every night I said yes when I wanted to say no, and I thought about the systems I'd helped design, the ones she still used, the ones she never changed the root, admin password on. That clarity returned, sharper this time. It didn't taste like revenge. Not yet. It tasted like reclamation, like the slow pull of strength through shattered pieces. She had rewritten my story without asking. Now it was time to write my own ending. The apartment was barely big enough to stretch out my arms. A cracked window unit rattled through the night like a tired breath, and the walls were stains like old grief, but it was mine. And no one knew where I'd gone. I moved in with 2 duffel bags, one for clothes, the other for things I wasn't ready to let go of. A copy of Women Who Run with the Wolves, the silver bracelet Daniel gave me for my birthday, and the flash drive I'd always carried in my purse, the one that held my original code, notes and diagrams from our CRM overhaul. I didn't open it. Not yet. Most days blurred. I woke late, ate dry toast, sat on the floor with my knees tucked to my chest and stared at the chipped white cabinets like they held answers. I used to be someone with structure, meetings, a salary, deadlines. Now I was just breath and echo. Some mornings I didn't brush my hair. Some nights I wept until my chest ached from the effort of keeping it silent. There was no one to hear. Anyway, I scrubbed floors I once walked in Louboutin's. I washed dishes by hand and kept the lights dim to save on the power bill. My skin lost its gloss. My voice shrank, but grief has a rhythm, a tide, and eventually I stopped fighting it. I started walking at first, just to escape the stale air of the apartment. Then further into neighborhoods I didn't recognize, into thrift bookstores, into the parks where kids screamed and old women fed birds like pennants. I walked past office buildings and wondered who was making coffee for her now, if the new VP used the same brand of perfume. If Daniel even remembered my voice, it didn't matter. Not anymore. One evening, I found myself in a secondhand shop, the kind where everything smells faintly of mothballs and lavender soap. I bought a used mirror, the kind that once belonged to a vanity set. Its frame was scratched, and there was a crack running down one corner like a vein, but I took it home, hung it on the wall with a single nail. For days, I couldn't look into it, and when I finally did, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked tired, but there was something else, a flicker, not fire, not yet. But maybe the memory of warmth. I began coding again, not for money, not for anyone else, for myself. I opened the flash drive, looked through the architecture I'd written over a year ago for the company's internal CRM, the one Daniel praised endlessly during late-night planning calls. I remembered every keystroke, every vulnerability, every workaround I created to speed up the process when their tech team dragged its feet. I remembered thinking, if I ever left, this would be my legacy. Instead, she claimed it. The product launched. Under her name, her vision, her genius, that I built it. And I had proof. Still, I didn't act on it. Not yet. I wasn't ready for revenge. I was still putting myself back together. Until the email arrived from an old coworker, Julia, quiet, kind. Always had her doubts about Daniel, but kept them to herself. Subject line: you need to see this. The message was short. They're using your CRM architecture in the new pitch decks. Daniel's taking all the credit. Again, thought you should know. Attached was a screenshot of a company-wide presentation, their next innovation phase. And there it was, clear as glass, my framework. My naming conventions. My custom user flow logic. Even the bug I never fixed. I stared at the screen. The betrayal wasn't a memory anymore. It was alive, ongoing, thriving off the bones I left behind. Something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage. Not yet. It was recognition. I wasn't hopeless. I wasn't erased. I was the architect. I had the keys. That night, I cleared my makeshift desk and powered up an old laptop I hadn't used in months, installed fresh security layers, set up private servers, re-downloaded the encrypted notes I'd once forgotten how to value, dove into the back end of my original code like I was crawling through a vision of myself I'd buried, and she was still there, sharp, inventive, quietly dangerous. I spent days reacquainting myself with her. She was me. Before Daniel, before the lies, before I forgot who I was, I built a sandbox server, replicated the CRM system, pulled up notes on the admin console, the one only I ever had full access to. Daniel never understood how deep the framework went. She didn't care. She liked results, not process. She trusted me too much. Or maybe not enough because I still had access to the core. I could see every patch, every new addition they'd made on top of my foundation. It was like watching someone build a castle over a graveyard. I didn't tell anyone. No revenge posts, no cryptic tweets, no group messages. Just silence. And strategy. My healing didn't come in dramatic bursts. It came in quiet victories, like holding down food without guilt, laughing at a meme I hadn't seen before, reading an entire novel without thinking about her, sleeping through the night without checking my phone for a text that never came. I started drinking real coffee again. Strong, bitter, no cream. I took down the bracelet and placed it in a drawer, not out of hate, out of release. I didn't need to wear history anymore. I wasn't sure what my next move would be, but for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of the question because I had something Daniel didn't: patience, memory, and truth. Truth she had buried under promotions, lipstick, and carefully scripted speeches, but I still had the shovel, and soon I'd know exactly where to dig. I didn't want to destroy her. I wanted her to feel what it was like to be haunted. To question what was real, to wake in the night with doubt curdling in her throat, to know in her bones that something she couldn't name was closing. In I became a whisper first. Just a flicker. Her team started missing calendar invites. Events vanished from the internal scheduling tool. Client decks refused to sync properly, formatting off, timelines missing. Notes she was certain she'd written were replaced with blank pages. Nothing huge. Just enough to make her think she was slipping. It blamed recent system updates. Minor bugs. We'll patch it by EOD. I smiled in my tiny apartment, watching from the back door I'd built into the system months ago. The same one she never cared to audit. The same one that let me walk through her digital walls without a sound. By the second week, she panicked. A presentation she'd worked on for weeks glitched mid-pitch, the entire visual layer replaced by black screens. I had timed the file corruption to trigger exactly at 10:37 a.m., just as she reached the final slide. She froze. The client blinked. Her face flushed red beneath her foundation. I watched the recording later. Twice. No one blamed her. Yet. But questions started forming. Not loud. Not spoken. Just raised eyebrows and tight-lipped conversations. That was the beginning of the unraveling. I didn't act impulsively. I journaled every step, every access, every login timestamp. If I ever had to explain it to authorities, to a lawyer, to myself, I wanted it clean, legal, precise. I wasn't a hacker. I was the original builder revisiting my blueprint. At night, I traced her paper trail, her emails, her edits. I found everything. She hadn't just taken credit for my CRM architecture. She had built her entire promotion on it. The code I wrote, the structure I designed, the analytics projections I crafted at 2 a.m. while she lay beside me, whispering about legacy, and she'd erase my name from every draft. But that wasn't the worst of it. I found evaluations she'd falsified, employees she'd discredited quietly, people who dared to speak up or ask for more. I found one email where she wrote to HR, X is unstable, too emotional, likely to implode. She meant me. The timestamp matched the week she kissed me on a hotel balcony in Rome. I printed everything. Built a timeline, created encrypted backups, uploaded them to 3 different clouds under different identities. I wasn't just gathering evidence, I was writing her confession in her own words. Then I waited, Dot. I waited for the moment she'd feel the walls close in, for the crack in her perfect mask, and it came, Dot. It always does. I walked past the building late one Thursday evening. I hadn't been there in months. The lights on the 17th floor still burned, the executive level. Her corner office glowed like a lighthouse. Dot. She was alone. Inside, she stood frozen in front of her monitor, palms flat on the desk, her jaw clenched. I couldn't hear her voice, but I knew that face. It was the one she made when she didn't understand something. When control began to slip through her fingers like smoke, I lingered across the street, blending with the crowd, watching Dot, and for the first time since she'd locked me out of her life, she looked afraid. She'd spent her entire career walking over bodies like mine, thinking no one would ever look back up, but ghosts always look back, and I was done hiding. The next day, I sent the first file anonymously to the internal ethics hotline, just one, a chain of emails between her and the new VP, Carolyn. In it, they discussed pushing out a junior analyst who had raised concerns about improper credit attribution. The tone was casual, ruthless. She referred to the analyst as deadweight. 2 hours later, Caroline's LinkedIn was scrubbed clean. By evening, she was removed from the company's org chart. It was too clean. Too fast. DENIEL was scrambling to cover tracks. So I released more. Employee reviews Danielle had altered. Meeting recordings she'd edited. A full PDF dossier of her leveraging intimacy for silence, mine included, though I scrubbed personal details, enough to outline a pattern, enough to demand attention. I didn't sign my name. I didn't need to. My fingerprints were in the code. And she knew it. I imagined her pacing the glass hallways, wondering who was peeling back the empire she built out of half-truths and betrayal. She must have suspected me. But without proof, all she had was paranoia, and paranoia is loud. It cracks. Facades.hr began internal reviews. Clients were alerted of system inconsistencies. Her access was monitored. For the first time in her career, Danielle Ashcroft had to explain herself. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the night she called me a mistake. Like I was an error she could delete from her history. No. This wasn't revenge. It was rebalancing, and still, I held the final card, the root key. The original timestamped log that proved I, not Danielle, was the architect of the company's core infrastructure. It was the digital equivalent of a birth certificate. I saved it for last. Because when justice comes, it should arrive in full, not in pieces. That night, I sat by my cracked mirror, hair damp from a long shower, and opened the file one last time. My initials blinked back at me in the metadata. KRD, the version control logs still intact. Even the comments I'd left. In the code, silly inside jokes and tired 2 a.m. ramblings were there. It wasn't just evidence. It was memory. My memory. She tried to rewrite it, but I had never deleted the original draft. Closed the laptop. Stood in front of the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't tired anymore. She looked like someone who had crawled out of her own grave and decided to start walking toward the sun. Not angry, not broken, just awake. DENIEL once told me power is about perception. She was right. But now it was my turn to decide what the world saw when they looked at her, and I was ready. to show them. I I woke early that morning, the kind of early where the world is still and blue and the city hasn't found its rhythm yet. My apartment was quiet except for the gentle rattle of the old window unit. Outside, rain tapped against the glass light. It was rehearsing something soft. I got dressed in silence. No music, no distractions. Just breath and cloth. Black slacks. White blouse. Hair pulled into a low knot. No makeup except for red lipstick, not her red, not the fire truck shade. She wore like armor. A softer red. One that didn't scream. One that whispered, "I survived you." I zipped my coat, picked up the slim black folio, and stepped into the rain. The shareholder meeting was held in one of those downtown towers with revolving doors and high polish. Marble floors. I walked past reception without stopping, straight to the 32nd floor. The elevator hummed. My reflection stared back from its mirrored walls, calm and UNB, ONKING, don't know when stop me. I was still listed as a system consultant. They hadn't revoked the title I once earned. Just forgot the woman who held it until now. The conference room was all glass and silence, 12 chairs around a gleaming table. I arrived early. Always have 10 minutes later, the room filled. Board members, advisors, legal reps. Then her DENNIEL. She entered in a tailored charcoal suit, hair sleeked back, lips pale. She didn't see me at first. She was too busy performing composure. But then our eyes met across the room. She froze. Just for a second, I offered no smile. No greeting. I simply placed the folio on the table. In front of her seat, she sat down like she hadn't just seen a ghost. The chairman began. There are claims presented to the board that require immediate attention. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The folder did the talking. Inside were timestamps, server logs, original code signatures, emails with altered evaluations, recordings of off-the-record conversations, and one letter addressed to the board outlining the timeline of Daniel's misconduct, her harassment, manipulation, the erasure of intellectual property, and the misuse of power in personal relationships. My name signed at the bottom. In ink, the room changed temperature. She reached for the pages with careful fingers, eyes scanning, jaw tightening. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was too calm, too sharp. "This is a vendetta," she said. A personal grudge dressed up in technical jargon. A legal rep replied without looking at her. "The documentation meets our burden of review. We will begin internal investigation immediately." She stood, breath sharp. "You're taking the word of a bitter ex?" A pause. Then the chairman, calm and clinical. "We're taking the word of the coat, Miss Ashcroft, and it's not yours." I watched her deflate, piece by piece, like a suit without the body. Her hands trembled, barely, but I saw it. The weight of losing control was foreign to her. For once, Daniel had no script. She left the room without looking at me. Her heels didn't click as loudly this time. I stayed behind as the legal team gathered my documents. They asked polite questions. I answered each one clearly, quietly, like someone who had rehearsed for this moment in dreams and in silence. They thanked me. They promised updates. I nodded, then left. Outside, the rain had softened to a drizzle. I walked 5 blocks in it, slow and steady, the kind of pace you take when you're learning how to be whole again. By the time I got home, The voicemail was waiting. Her voice, hollow, shaky, no longer coated in ice. Why did you do this to me? I listened only once, then deleted it. I made tea chai, cinnamon heavy, the way my mother used to make it when I was small and sad. I sat by the window, wrapped in a knit blanket from the thrift store, and watched the city glisten. There was no applause, no cinematic swell of music. Just peace. Just the quiet settling of justice, like snow on rooftops. Revenge, I've learned, doesn't always come in fire or fury. Sometimes it arrives in truth and stillness. In the reclaiming of your own voice, she lost her title within a week. Company released a careful statement citing policy violations and internal breaches. No name was mentioned, but everyone knew. Her new girlfriend? Gone, vanished like perfume in the rain. No trace. Not even in the press. I received a formal apology, unsigned, and a settlement offer to keep the story quiet. I declined both. Wasn't interested in money. I was interested in becoming someone who didn't need this story anymore. I moved out of the apartment 2 months later, into a loft near the edge of the city, big windows, wooden floors, light. The ring she gave me, a thin silver band from Rome, slipped on my finger after a night of wine and lies, sits untouched in a drawer, not out of hatred. Just irrelevance. I don't need to burn the past to move on. I just need to stop carrying it like proof. There are days I still think about her. Not the woman who kissed me in hotel rooms, but the woman who erased me. I wonder what she sees now when she looks in the mirror. If she hears my footsteps in every glitch. If she knows the shape of my silence. I don't care. I'm not hers anymore. Never was. Because power isn't control. It's clarity, and peace isn't FORGEEEEEFULNESS. It's knowing what and who you survived.